All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me.
Well, it's the Adult in the Room podcast. Victoria Taft with you on a crazy day. It is insane, and glad to spend this insane day with you talking about the biggest issues that we've got going on right now. Lots of stuff in the news. I come to you from the KTTH studios. Seattle Red is what we're calling it now, where I'm filling in for Jason Rantz today on Seattle Radio. So I apologize for not having my fancy, pretty colors behind me. It's pretty stark, and I mean, whoa, I feel like there's some Klieg lights in here, different sound, but doing what I can do. By the way, President Trump essentially, largely, won his case against, if you will, the state of New York and Letitia James, who had always set forth the desire to go out and get President Trump. You've seen the sound bites. You've watched the video. You know that her sole aim in life when she was running was, I'm going to get Trump. And I know that maybe for some people, that's the way they view the justice system. They've certainly done that to Trump since he declared for the presidency in the 2024 election. But that's really not the way it's supposed to work. It is not supposed to work that way where you just say, well, I got a guy here and I'm going to go find something wrong with him. That's a bozo no. No can do, baby. So when the judge went to, into this case, Judge Engeron, who decided that he was going to retire after this case. So it was like, no F's given is basically what that's shorthand for. And he went and broke the law every which way. Indeed, it was crazy. Actually, not just the law, but propriety, civility. And, you think Donald Trump's got, he's pretty outspoken. Fair enough. But he ain't going around breaking the law. Breaking the law. No, that was the judge. That was Letitia James. So, nut. Here it is. Message. Trump's $500 million fine that she forced him and he put on Donald Trump while he was appealing this ridiculous case. Gone. $500 million. And now you may not remember all this, and I'm going to go back on all the stories I wrote. I followed that trial. I followed every day of that trial. And the trial was, remember, it was an accounting trial in which the time-limited charges, 34 of them, were bootstrapped, as they call it. That means like they got out the duct tape, they took out the zip ties, they did everything they could at the behest of Norm Eisman, and they concocted this case that had previously been kicked out of SDNY, Southern District of New York lawyers, run by people who hated Donald Trump. And they said, no way, you cannot bring this case. It's unethical. If nothing, it's illegal, it's unethical, there's no there. And so this was a case without any victims. And this judge, he said, well, by the way, not Judge Engeron, I was wrong judge. I just said, that's what that look in my, like, oh, that's the wrong judge. So this is the one where he's accused of making too much money on Mar-a-Lago, saying it's worth more than it is. his other assets are worth more than they are, so he can get loans. And so all the people from whom he got loans, they all said, "Oh, by the way, um, yeah, we love that guy. We will do business with him again." So it was crazy. That was an embarrassing trial. They made him sit in court every day. He was ordered to be in court. He could not leave. And that was during the election campaign. And they did that on purpose. Obviously, this was all in an attempt to get him to pull out of the race. Letitia James at one point said, oh, no, correction. uh, Rachel Maddow said to a person who was a participant in the case, hey, if Trump just got out of the race, we just drop everything, right? You guys would just drop everything. And she suggested that that was an appropriate remedy. And Ed Turner actually said that was an appropriate remedy for Letitia James, for which I would say, you can't say that. That's unethical. You can't talk about that. That's another case. But I thought, well, how interesting is this? How interesting. $500 million. So he won that today. Now, tonight, you know what he's doing? Tonight, you know what he's doing? He's going outside in the District of Columbia with National Guard. He's going to be in a vehicle, one can only hope. I haven't heard any more details about how he plans to do this. But he is going to go out and see how everything's going with the National Guard and the additional police officers who are working. I'm just going to make sure. Trump goes to D.C. to observe. Well, check this out. Yeah, he's going to patrol. He's patrol tonight. We don't know how. There's nothing that I could find that he said anything about at this juncture in the day. So you never know. During law enforcement on the streets of Washington, D.C., a move that seemed designed more to draw attention to his broad federal crackdown. I'm going to be going out tonight, I think, with the police. I think. There you go. I think. With the police and the military, of course, the president told radio host Todd Starnes on Thursday. Okay, fine. So maybe he will, and maybe he won't. In likelihood, can you imagine his Secret Service detail going, no, no, you cannot go. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Donald Trump cannot go outside and put himself at risk with the city the way it is. Of course, he's cleaned it up extraordinarily. There's another thing that happened. In Washington, D.C., I get the Washington Post. I know. I can't unget it anymore. I've tried to cancel it so many times, and I printed it for my stint over here at the radio station today. And it was basically this. The story was this. Hey, ever since Donald Trump came into Washington, D.C., and brought National Guard troops and others with him, the restaurant industry has just gone down by 30%. Washington Post reported that earlier this week, yesterday or day before. And I thought, reservations have gone down by 30%. And of course, when I see somebody go, well, that's very specific. Interesting. So the reservations have gone down by 30%. And then you read on. And then it's probably, I don't know, 10th paragraph. If it's in the printed edition, may not be until the jump page that you read this. Well, but we're getting mixed results because this is a very slow time. August is very slow in Washington, D.C. And in addition, the Congress is on recess, so therefore there aren't as many people there and there's not as much to see. It's very hot. Nobody wants to come. And so as a result, what they've done is they've said, well, we're going to do a restaurant week here. And so all the people who are in charge of these restaurants, these restaurant owners and chefs and all these people who are not necessarily Trump lovers, okay? What they said was, well, we're very concerned because there are troops on the street, which means people will be safer. And we're very afraid time after time. Several Washington Post comments, they're quoting people, and nobody wants to be identified because that wouldn't work. Washington Post story. So they have several who are not identified, and they say, "Oh, I'm really worried. There's troops. I don't know." Of course, everyone else in D.C., black people, 40% of the population are saying, "Woohoo! We showed you that on Tuesday." Okay. So then we find out that, well, okay, so reservations have gone down because reservations always go down in August because it's August recess. So that happened. And then now the story sort of changed. Oh, everything, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. All the people are coming back to the restaurants. It's a miracle. Washington Post. Then CBS picked it up. Oh, 30% off on the reservations. You know what? That doesn't mean that the place isn't full. That just means that 70% of the people in the restaurant for a given night have reservations. How many times have you gone to a restaurant and said, "We're here, it's really early, we don't have reservations"? Oh yeah, we can fit you in at 6:15. We can fit you in, that's fine. Or sometimes it's, "Hey, we can fit you in at 9:30. Sad, sorry, but that's the way it goes." Yeah, yeah. That's the way it goes. But they didn't have a reservation. Oh, okay. So it was all kinds of attempts by the media to make the National Guard story and cleaning up Washington's streets a negative when all the locals are like, slow clap for Donald Trump. Woo! Slow clap for Donald Trump. So that's happening in the news. We've got J. Christian Adams from the Public Interest Legal Foundation on the program today to talk about the Trump executive order wanting to get rid of mail balloting and also to clean up voter rolls and make it safer to vote in the United States. And so, of course, we've got this against the backdrop that all the elections by the founders proclamation are done in the states. So what does this mean exactly? And so we go through some of the minutia, and we also find out that PILF, that's the organization, we find out that PILF is the one, Public Interest Legal Foundation. Yeah, they're the reason why Texas got to go and redistrict. So there is that. So there is lots of expertise on the program today. Speaking of which, remember now we had TikTok Tatiana. Remember TikTok Tatiana and how she was picked up by ICE, and then ICE's vehicle got towed away. Remember? Still have not heard back from DHS yet about that. And I threw out another email to them today. I think they're sitting on it. I think they're sitting on it because later video that I've seen, and you saw too on Tuesday, it looks like the same vehicle. They may have gotten back the vehicle from the tow truck driver, but I'm not sure. So I'm not sure. But here's what I do know. There's this guy. And this guy made news. He is a 20-year-old kid. It looked pretty brutal. I'm going to keep the noise down so that you're not going to hear all the F-bombs because it's pretty much exclusively, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" Okay, so it goes on. I just want you to see it. So here's Border Patrol. And Border Patrol, look at that guy. Holy crap, that guy's, I'm sorry. I admire someone who goes to the gym, okay? So, but I was kind of wondering what I had that shirt on for. Nevertheless, this looks pretty brutal because anytime you're doing a video and somebody comes and jacks you up, or you're jacking somebody up, which is what this kid was doing, and it all of a sudden looks like chaos. See, it looks like chaos. And so this seems like an ordinarily, you know, red-blooded. He's an American kid. He's a citizen. And there are people. He works at Walmart, and he was just getting in the way of ICE officers arresting the janitor, apparently, who was a criminal alien. So that looks messy. And oh my goodness, you would have thought that thunder and lightning had come down that the rains had started, that there was a bolt from the blue. My goodness, terrible things were happening in Los Angeles. This is in Pico Rivera. So it made all the LA news stations check this out. I just want you to see what the LA TV stations did with it.
The outraged after a violent confrontation between armed Border Patrol agents and a man who residents say is a U.S. citizen.
Dozens gathered to protest what they call unnecessary force without due process. It happened in the parking lot of a Walmart.
Unnecessary force without due process. What are you going to stop? The kid, when he pushes an officer, just gave them probable cause. That's all you need to know, dummy. How many years have you been in the news business?
Walmart shopping center in Pico Rivera, and was caught on camera by several of the bystanders who tried to intervene.
KTLA's Carlos Salcedo live in Pico Rivera with more of that video and now reaction from community members. Carlos.
From community members. Wait for it.
Yeah, well, the public outcry has been widespread. Hundreds of protesters have marched throughout Pico Rivera. Even at this hour, take a look here. There's about 200 protesters still at this intersection, many of them waving flags and signs. Now, most of them have been peaceful. Things getting a bit rowdy within the last hour, though. Some people setting off fireworks, illegal fireworks. Tonight, though, their message is clear. They want ICE out of their community. They want ICE out of Pico Rivera, especially after what unfolded out here earlier. A tense confrontation between Border Patrol agents and a 20-year-old man in Pico Rivera. Adrian Andrew Martinez was on a lunch break working at the nearby Walmart when video shows him standing up to agents who appeared infuriated. Backup arrives and armed agents swarm agents.
Notice that. They were infuriated. They came in hot. Sorry.
Adrian taking him down. His family told KTLA that Adrian was detained after he intervened, allegedly assaulting an agent who was questioning someone else at the shopping center.
They tried to take the janitor or something. That's what I heard. But I heard that he tried defending the janitor they tried taking.
His friend, who did not want...
Okay, he did not want his friend the janitor, who works at Walmart like he does. He did not want his friend the janitor to be taken by ICE agents, so he decided to fight them. Or I'm sorry, the Border Patrol agents. So he decided to fight them. And that's just dumb.
To be identified, says he's a U.S. citizen. Soon after, protesters took to the streets, marching from City Hall to the intersection of Washington and Rosemead, demanding ICE out of Pico Rivera.
This is not the country that we live in. This is not what we represent. And we're desperate. They're pushing us to the edge, and we're trying to keep everybody safe and peaceful.
Protesters want city leaders to step up for the undocumented community.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so he wanted to. He's not undocumented. He's documented. He's a citizen, and they're hanging their hat on the fact that because they bought into their hype, that all they are doing is going up to Latino men and jacking them up and taking them away and put them on a plane, and they're Abrego Garcia-ing him. I mean, they're not going to get out unless a U.S. senator decides to come have margaritas with them. I mean, this is a travesty. This is unethical. This shan't happen in the United States of America. And of course, we don't like the looks of this whole thing because we don't like people getting hurt and by the cops. But it happens. In fact, you're not going to believe when it happens. Most often, it happens, I would say, almost exclusively when you resist arrest, which is what that was. Okay, so you say, "Oh, that's not resisting arrest, Victoria." Well, just go back to school on it, and we'll meet together here for another classroom session in the next program. But here's the thing: so everybody's banking on the fact that they jacked him up because he was a non-citizen, but then it turns out he was a citizen. He was. Okay. And we go over here. I just want to make sure I got this. I do got this. So here's, I get this, I get all the emails from U.S. Attorney's Office down there. And just to read this to you, because I can't show it to you. Federal grand jury. You know, our 20-year-old guy who, he's a citizen. He was just helping his friend. Well, it turns out, another side of the story. Federal grand jury charges Pico Rivera man with impeding immigration officers arresting illegal alien in parking lot. Santa Ana, or as the locals like try to call it, Santa Ana. A federal grand jury returned an indictment today charging a Pico Rivera man with impeding immigration officers from conducting enforcement actions in the parking lot of a Pico Rivera shopping center in June. Remember when everything was going on in June. Adrian Andrew Martinez is charged with one count of conspiracy to impede a federal officer, felony that carries statutory maximum sentence of 6 years in federal prison. Oh, gee, now, wow. He's a one count of conspiracy to impede a federal officer. Not only did he impede a federal officer, but they've got him on conspiracy. They're indicting him for this. A grand jury of his peers indicted him on this. 6 years in federal prison, possibly. Now, I've seen other video of this kid. I say kid because everybody's a kid to me, because I'm the adult in the room, not the child in the room. And baby face. Cool. They're going to love him in prison, okay? Not good for him. His arraignment scheduled for Thursday. That would be on this day. So this is what they say. According to the indictment and court documents previously filed in the case, on June 17th in Pico Rivera, federal agents were arresting a person believed to be an illegal alien residing in the United States. Martinez, who worked at a nearby Walmart, stopped and exited. This wasn't even a Walmart. This was in the parking lot of the whole shopping center, but he was there. He's in his car. So Babyface Martinez is in his car. He's going, oh, I'm going to do something. He's going to come in and be a hero for his friend, the janitor, who's getting jacked by the Border Patrol. So he stopped, he exited his vehicle, and confronted the United States border agents. Oh, they're not done yet. A crowd of several other individuals. So they get the mob together, just like they've been instructed to do, and they stop their vehicles. Other individuals also stopped their vehicles, parked near the agents, partially blocking the lanes in the parking lots as agents attempted to leave with the arrestee. A hostile crowd collectively honked at the agents from their cars and shouted at them. The crowd, both in vehicles and on foot, surrounded the agents, blocking them from leaving the area. One of these vehicles was that one that Martinez had driven. Martinez positioned his vehicle to block the agent's vehicle. So in this case, hey, remember the TikTok Tatiana, they had the guy who was the person who towed the car, right? So he towed the car, but then we don't know what's going on in that case. They could have gotten the car back. Sort of looks like they may have. But that guy was on for 5 years. If he didn't get the car back, and there were charges brought. But now we know what happens when you block the ICE guys, or the Border Patrol in this case. You know what happens when you block the Border Patrol guys? 6 years in the slammer. That's what happens. 6 years in the slammer. So this is a message. This is the purpose pitch, is what they call it in baseball. And it's trying to brush this guy back a little bit, brush everybody back a little bit, because they're getting a little too full of themselves with their anti-ICE apps. They're going and surrounding officers when they hit these spots, and they don't have to follow them. They just look on their apps. Fortunately for us, TikTok Tatiana is off the air now. She's on her way back to Colombia, but this is going on and has gone on, especially in June in Southern California. And this happened in Washington, D.C. also. This happened in Washington, D.C., where this guy is I'll show you the video, but can't right now. So there's this guy, he gets jacked up by ICE on the streets of Washington, D.C. And there just happens to be, because this is Washington, D.C., and there are nothing but hot and cold running reporters, activists, and lawmakers. Okay. And this guy happened to get jacked up in front of a reporter. And so she pulls out her iPhone or whatever she's got. You know what she does? Starts videoing this arrest. And she's appalled. And he is crying and talking about mi familia, mi familia. And he's very upset, as you would be. I would totally be upset. If I got arrested by ICE or any federal officer, maybe 5:30 in the morning, and you've got the entire SWAT team out there, and there are people with guns, like long guns, that are trained on your house, and like some of the J6ers, and nobody cared about those guys. Whatever happened to that? What I'm sorry, what? So this guy's, actually, there was one chick I saw in the previous case where they, I think it's this case, and she looks like she's doing an open field tackle on this guy. And I thought, wow, well played. And then she drops him. I think it's this case, so here we go. I was impressed, but because you don't see that very often. But I will say that in the Washington, D.C. case, the reporters all freaked out. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. And immediately tweets it out. So she's got it up on X. The X message says, oh my gosh, this poor man is being taken away by, he's got a rap sheet. He's a criminal alien. It's like, whoop, all of a sudden, they're really making a difference in Washington, D.C. The DOJ, Attorney General of the United States, says, well, the crime rate has gone down significantly week over week in Washington, D.C. And of course, it's a little too early to be making those huge pronouncements, but you can't help but notice if one week it's 1 and the next week it's -1. Okay, what a bad math, but whatever. Like 1 week is 10, and then the next week is 10x or minus 10x. Here's the thing. I never want you to come to me and ask me about any higher math, okay? Just not happening. Just don't, right? Don't do that. So this is happening on the streets of Washington, D.C., and they've decided that they're going to come in and they're going to take out the riffraff because it's the 1% or what have you, who are responsible for all the recidivism. And do you realize, this is a wild thing, do you realize that they talk about the juvenile crime rate in Washington, D.C., and the juvenile crime rate is just up. Oh, we can't do anything to those poor children. Do you know how old the juveniles are in Washington, D.C.? I mean, they are Nancy Pelosi, Obamacare age juveniles. People who are up to 20 and 25 years old are considered juveniles in Washington, D.C. What? Are you serious right now? Oh, yeah, they're serious. And so, homie, don't play that. And that's really what's going on. Here we have the money shot, the money clip from yesterday. And so National Guard sets up at Union Station, which has, it's a jewel of a building, as I reported over at PG Media. It's beautiful, it's expansive, and it has turned into it was until Trump's latest attempt to clean things out. It was what would one call that? Oh yeah, it would be a homeless encampment / drug den / place filled with people who are bent over like tacos because of the trank. It's like they're this way. Not good. Not good at all. So I take a picture. I see a picture rather. Got a picture of what it looked like 2 years ago, and it looks like a homeless encampment. And nobody goes there. Nobody wants to go there. Or at the very least, you get your last rites before you go in there. Okay. So then we have the one that's from this week, and it's, what are you going to do? Go running around where the National Guard guys are? There's big old, Humvee or something, but yeah, it's making a difference in Washington, D.C. And the people who have hit the streets, the white people who have hit the streets, the white old people who have hit the streets, hey, hey, ho, ho, Donald Trump has got to go. Yeah. So Stephen Miller, who's the domestic policy counselor to President Trump, you'll want to stand up and cheer after you hear this.
First of all, thank you to the Vice President for bringing us here today. Thank you, Secretary, for your leadership. And most importantly, thank you to the men and women of the National Guard. I think here's the most important point. There are residents who lived in Washington, D.C. their entire lives. Their parents lived here. Their grandparents lived here. And they have lived for generations in intolerable conditions of crime and decay. There are parts of the city, I moved to the city 20 years ago. There are places where I've seen graffiti that has been untouched for 2 decades. There are homeless encampments that have made it impossible for families to use public parks and public recreation for as long as I've lived here. There are hundreds of residents of this city who are shot in street violence every single year, making it one of the most violent cities on planet Earth. And for too long, 99% of this city has been terrorized by 1% of the city. And the voices that you hear out there, those crazy communists, they have no roots. They have no connections to the city. They have no families they are raising in this city. They have no one that they are sending to school in this city. They have no jobs in this city. They have no connections to this community at all. But they're the ones who've been advocating for the 1%, the criminals, the killers, the rapists, the drug dealers. And I'm glad they're here today. Because me, Pete, and the Vice President are all going to leave here, and inspired by them, we're going to add thousands more resources to this city to get the criminals and the gang members out of here. We're going to dismantle those networks, and we're going to prove that a city can serve for the law-abiding citizens who live there. We are not going to let the communists destroy a great American city, let alone the nation's capital. And let's just also address one other thing. All these demonstrators that you've seen out here in recent days, all of these elderly white hippies, they're not part of the city, never have been. And by the way, most of the citizens who live in Washington, D.C. are black. This is not a city that has had any safety for its black citizens for generations. And President Trump is the one who is fixing that with the support of the Metropolitan Police Department, the support of the National Guard, and our federal law enforcement officers. Right. So we're going to ignore these stupid white hippies that all need to go home and take a nap because they're all over 90 years old. And we're going to get back to the business of protecting the American people and the citizens of Washington, D.C.
Right after that, J.D. Vance says, are there any questions? No, there aren't, actually. So another story that's been percolating is the attempt by the Trump administration to get rid of mail-in balloting. How successful will that be? Well, we put it to a specialist in the dark arts of legal beagleness. And he heads the Public Interest Legal Foundation. He is J. Christian Adams. We talked to him a little bit earlier, and here's the way our interview came off. And talking with us about what the president plans to do with an executive order in an attempt to outlaw mail-in balloting for federal elections. What's your first reaction to this? And you must be just doing cartwheels.
Well, look, mail balloting is the most vulnerable part of our system. It's a bad idea. It puts the post office in charge of deciding who's got power in the country. There's nothing good about it. And so I'm glad that more people are talking about it, including the president. He understands apparently that it's a bad idea. He cited our work in the past. I'm glad that he is still focused. And states should not be using mail ballots. Nevada might be the worst. California's bad. Oregon's bad. Michigan's bad. So I'm thrilled that it's getting more attention.
Well, I mean, this is almost the left's holy grail, mail-in balloting. How much do they rely on this balloting to emerge in the win column time after time?
Well, they did for a while. I think the tide has turned as far as who benefits from it, frankly. but that doesn't remove the fact that it is a vulnerability in the system. Whether Republicans or Democrats are benefiting doesn't matter. What matters is that it allows breakdown. It allows other people to vote other people's ballots. It allows ballots to stack up in Nevada apartment complexes where the voters no longer live. So the fact is that it is a terrible vulnerability in our election system. So I'm extraordinarily glad that it's getting the attention it deserves.
Yeah. One of the things that I remember very well, because I'm old enough to know, because I'm the adult in the room, is that when mail-in balloting started, all of a sudden, Republicans ceased winning statewide elections in Oregon and Washington since then, and in California.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good observation. It's hard to know if it's causality or correlation. In the place that are really, I keep going back to Nevada, that it really has an impact on the political culture is, remember, Nevada has automatic vote by mail. It's not just mail balloting. It's like, it's always going to be, it's automatic mail balloting. It's not you call and request, it's you automatically get. And when you combine that, Victoria, with dirty voter rolls, you get a disaster like you have in Nevada. You can watch our video at publicinterestlegal.org, where we go to the casinos and strip clubs and liquor stores looking for the registered voter who's supposed to be living there and doesn't. Well, okay, that's
Right.
one thing. But when you automatically send a ballot to Harry's Liquor Barn, it creates a real problem.
Well, and I watched and shared your videos about that. They were hilarious, and they would be laugh out loud funny for many people, except they're deadly serious because those bars and casinos are getting ballots. And presumably some people are voting those ballots.
Yeah, it's a real problem because the dirty voter rolls make the mail balloting system a toxic explosion, where you have this terrible situation of vulnerabilities cranked into the system. And I'm quite confident, by the way, that Adam Laxalt would be in the U.S. Senate if it weren't for mail ballots. There would be one fewer Democrat senator. So maybe there's the example where the mail balloting had a direct impact on the outcome.
Oh, interesting. 709,000 voters in the state of Washington are only connected to the voter rolls through a license, the driver's license, which is given out to anybody. And so what Glenn Morgan over at We the Govern has been trying to do is to get a basis of comparison. How can he get the DHS information to show who's illegally in the country and or whatever that shows, and compare and contrast them against all these people who are registered to vote and who aren't apparently not qualified. We don't know, but we know one thing: 709,000 of them only have one bit of ID to connect them to the voter rolls. This is a not right, correct? I mean, this is
Well,
just wrong.
yeah. So what's supposed to happen under federal law, under the Help America Vote Act of 2002, is anytime someone registers to vote, they need to capture a unique numeric identifier. And that could either be part of your social security number or your driver's license number. That's federal law. That passed under in 2002 after the Bush v. Gore fight. So that should provide a basis for Washington or any state to then turn around and utilize a variety of databases to ascertain whether that person's eligible. That's why they passed that law. So the system is set up to not fail. Whether or not Washington is taking advantage of all the particular requirements, I can't answer because I haven't looked at Washington.
No, they can't. They used to be able to tell roughly how many illegal aliens were voting because, or not, or on the rolls, because what happened was they were able to look at the jury
Yeah.
excuse forms, and now they've been outlawed from seeing those.
Right. And don't forget, there's something really important here that we learned through hard research. It's not so much illegal aliens getting registered to vote. Okay. And we can prove this with numbers out of North Carolina. We have a report called Motor Voter at 30. it is actually legally here aliens that are the ones getting on the rolls because they're going to get driver's license. They're the ones touching social services. And remember, under motor voter, social service agencies are also voter registration agencies. So because they're here legally, they can get welfare. The case is called Plyler v. Doe, U.S. Supreme Court. So anytime these legal aliens touch the government, they get offered voter registration. It generally, Victoria, is the illegal aliens are not touching the federal government. In fact, they're trying to run away from it. So that's why you see most of the foreigners getting registered to vote, like 95 to 98% of them are here legally. It's not the illegal aliens, it's actually the legal aliens.
Okay, so are they supposed to vote? The legal aliens, H-1B visa
No,
holders and that sort of thing?
no. But what's
Okay.
happened is this whole system of touching the government, social services, DMV, take your pick, is where the registration is happening.
Wow, that is extraordinary. How could we ever get a clean voter list from the feds?
A clean voter list. Well, that's a tough one. Some states could just check to see if they are missing data like dates of birth. As I can tell you, California, Michigan, Pennsylvania, they don't even have dates of birth for some of the voter registrants. And so if you don't have the date of birth, you can never do list maintenance. Because when that person dies, they won't remove them from the rolls because there's no date of birth to cross match with the death record. Just like you can never remove them if they're duplicates, Victoria. If you don't have the date of birth and you get another John Smith on the registers to vote, you can't cross-check it with the John Smiths you already have because there's no date of birth. But all throughout American voter rolls, there's missing dates. There's missing data. So step one to cleaning the rolls is to fill in all the blanks. Fill in all the blanks.
So it would be, so you couldn't just say you don't have a DOB in there, so you're off the list. You just
Oh,
can't
that's
do that.
illegal. You can't do that to somebody. Yeah, I mean, some
Oh.
people might lust over doing that. It feels good, but
Right.
you can't look. Sometimes these are government officials making the mistakes. So how could you say to the voter, you're not allowed to vote because the government official knucklehead didn't key in your data? You can't do that.
Yeah, I see. Okay, all right. Well, now what do you make of the? I'm going to pull up the president's EO, really, or yeah, I guess this is the EO. There we go. And here we go. Do you have any problems with what he has sought to do, which is to clean up the voter rolls, make federal elections much more secure? He talks about how he wants to make sure that they're not subject to the whims of the different states, even though states are in charge of elections. How do you circle that square?
Well, look, let's start with the Constitution. The Constitution gave the states the power to run their own elections, and that's a good thing. The founders got it right because if you centralize power, power grows. That's the one thing we know. The founders are brilliant. They decentralized power. They gave it to the states in the Constitution. So the question becomes, what can be done about dirty voter rolls? Well, I will tell you, I've been litigating this for years, and we have cases in the Sixth Circuit Court. I don't want to name all the courts because people will start turning off and not listening. But there are some of those cases that address the question of what can be done. And I'm sorry to tell you, not much. The federal courts have ruled that if a state like Michigan, and that's where the big case comes from against Jocelyn Benson, and I testified to Congress about this about 4 weeks ago. The courts have ruled if you have a program, then that's pretty much good enough. If you make an attempt, it's like a participation trophy. The proof is not in the pudding, put another way. If you have a program, then you satisfy federal law. Now, I'm terribly disappointed, I will tell you, Victoria. This case was before the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Department of Justice didn't file a brief in the case. So, and that's just my own personal disappointment because we were out on our own. Sorry?
Was that the Trump Department of Justice didn't do that?
Yes.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
That's lame.
And so the court ruled against us and ruled that the proof is not in the pudding. You don't have to have clean voter rolls. You just try to have clean voter rolls. And it's a disaster. And we're going to be trying to seek a cert petition. So maybe people will wake up and say, oh my God, if we want to have clean rolls, we ought to do something about this and join the Public Interest Legal Foundation in seeking Supreme Court review. But we'll see. We're working on that petition now. But the state of the law is not good for requiring clean voter rolls.
So will this EO have any impact on cleaning voter rolls and getting things a little bit more up to scratch for safe?
I'll tell you one area where it has a huge impact is, well, I'll tell you two. The first one, to close the loop on the last topic, hopefully somebody will read the EO and say, oh my gosh, we should have filed a brief and we still get another chance. Okay, how about that for low-hanging fruit? But here's the other area where it's tremendous, and that's the SAVE database over at DHS, where the SAVE database is the list of the non-citizens as best the federal government knows it. And so this EO has opened up the SAVE database to states so they can get access to the data as to who's a non-citizen.
What? So, for example, in for sure for Washington, maybe it sounds like it would be something they do in California. If you have anything to do with the feds with respect to citizenship and or checking someone's citizenship, it automatically becomes illegal. And so state officials who participate in that could theoretically be prosecuted.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. They could be prosecuted for
engaging in finding out if a person has citizenship or asking on any level if they have citizenship.
Well, the National Voter Registration Act that governs state registration in 44 states requires state officials to ask about citizenship. It's the law. It's federal law. So whenever there is a voter registration form that's a motor voter form, that's actually in the statute. It says, are you a U.S. citizen, yes or no? And then you sign the form saying, under penalty of perjury, I declare I'm a U.S. citizen. So thankfully, that law is in place and is used for federal voter registration forms in 44 states.
Apparently, in the state of Washington, there's quite a bit of concern about being prosecuted if, in fact, you give out information that would divulge anyone's citizenship.
Well, giving out and asking it are two different things. They don't have any leeway in Washington. They've got to ask it.
All right. Just wanted to try to clarify that anyway. So we've got the ballot harvesting. We've got hoping that is going to be prohibited, but can they do that?
Well, you mean as a federal matter, prohibit ballot harvesting?
Yeah, probably not, huh?
Highly unlikely. There's a lot of problems with it. I mean, they could try, but generally speaking, federal government doesn't issue rules about the collection of ballots in state elections, or obviously there's federal candidates on the ballot. I'm trying to think of an example where that has happened. I guess there's a law that says you can't beat people up who are trying to vote. So I guess that's one example under the Section 11B of the Voting Rights Act. But generally speaking, the federal government doesn't sort of issue any sorts of statutes regarding how ballots can be collected. That sort of falls under the purview of the states.
What else can we look for in this new attention to ballot security?
Well, look, I've said that. Look, there's HAVA dollars. Okay, people might say, "What are you talking about, HAVA dollars?" Help America Vote Act. There are pots of money that are sitting around that go to the states to help with their election administration. If I was the federal government, namely through the Election Assistance Commission, the EAC, I'd stop sending money to states that use mail ballots. In fact, they did the opposite in 2020. In order to get states to move to mail, they were sent tens of millions of dollars, right? In 2020, states got truckloads of cash to facilitate the transition to mail ballots. That needs to end. No more money to do mail balloting.
Love that. That would be nice. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see if anybody's got the huevos to do it.
Well,
But that's
look,
a great idea, Christian.
the EAC is tied 2-2, and they have to approve grants to states. There's 2 Republican commissioners who can simply say, no more money for mail balloting. If you have mail ballots, you're not getting money from the Help America Vote Act fund.
I think Congress would go along with the ability to get rid of the mail-in ballots from a federal level.
No, because there's too many Republicans in Congress who respect the state's ability to set their own rules.
Well, but if they do that, I mean, isn't there a way to create a path for federal elections to be in person? I mean, of course, you have a 2-tier election system, but couldn't they insist that there'd be more security for the federal elections?
Well, sort
Or is it
of,
just
yes. But
unworkable?
if we're talking specifically about mail ballots, I don't think there's the votes to
Mhm.
impose a federal ban on mail ballots. I don't think it's a close call.
Mhm. Under the EO, it talks about having, security for the federal elections because that's the only thing over which the feds have any say, in these every 2 and 4 years. Okay, so congressional elections and presidential elections and that sort of thing. Is there some way that they could, you know all the rules. Is there some way that they could, just bring some pressure to bear to force states into doing in-person voting for those offices?
Well, yes, there is a way, but what I'm trying to emphasize is there's not the political votes to do it. You could say all federal elections must be in person. That will maybe get 25 senators in favor of that. That will maybe get, I don't know, 140, 150, 160 House votes. It will not pass Congress to do that, and it won't even be a close call because Republicans have started using mail ballots. Republicans have started to
Yeah, in
rely on mail.
self-defense.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that the genie is, look, I'm not advocating one way or another. I'm just counting, okay? And there is simply no way that will ever pass Congress, at least as we sit here today in this political environment that I'm living in the real world, right?
In the meantime, speaking of elections, there's this huge redistricting issue going on in the United States. California Governor Gavin Newsom says he wants to make up all the Democrat seats that have just been lost in Texas in the state of California. Is that fundamentally fair? Is that even illegal potentially?
Well, you have just touched on a third rail here. I have to take some responsibility for this whole snowball getting started because of a case that I was involved in Galveston, Texas, called Petaway versus Galveston. And this case in federal court went to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And, I was in the room, I worked on the case. And it struck down, or I should say it redefined what this is really super complicated law, so I'm trying to simplify it. A plaintiff cannot sue if they are combining races, Black plus Hispanic, to create a majority minority district. And this set the whole snowball rolling in Texas because there's a bunch of these are called coalition districts. They're coalitions between Blacks and Hispanics to basically create a Democrat seat. And we won that case for Galveston. Public Interest Legal Foundation was the counsel of record. And we won in the Fifth Circuit, and it completely transformed redistricting law in the Fifth Circuit, which includes Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. And that's why the legislature in Texas decided to get rid of these coalition districts that were no longer protected by the Voting Rights Act because of our case. And that's what set the whole ball rolling. And that's what set the California issue in response. So that's the sort of the history of this. Good luck, California. They're free to do whatever they want. But, as far as Texas goes, they're also free to do whatever they want.
I did not know that you were the progenitor of this drama going on in the United States of America. What's your reaction to all of it? I mean,
I got to tell you, I think back to a phone call I made when Galveston got sued by the left and the Justice Department. And I called another lawyer from Texas I know, and I said, hey, did you see they're alleging a coalition claim in this Galveston case? And he said, yeah. I said, let's kill it. Let's try to find a way to kill coalitions out of this case. Well, it turns out they had already had lawyers, so we weren't even involved in the case for the first year. We came in late and we made the argument that I just described to you, and it became the silver bullet that destroyed the plaintiff's case and transformed the law. But I just think back to that phone call I made, and like, thank goodness we did this, right?
Wow. Christian Adams, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you spending some time with us, both on the podcast as well as on Seattle Red. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me, Victoria.
So that was pretty awesome, I would say. And getting the number one guy in the country to come on and talk about stuff like that, yeah. So wonderful. So we'll see you back here on Tuesday. That's next live stream. And have a great week and weekend. See you then. Okay. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. We do not take you for granted. We appreciate every single person who tunes in every week to listen and watch this program. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday, live streaming on Rumble, and then on every other podcast platform shortly thereafter when we can port it over and get it over there as soon as we can. All the shows can be found at victoriataft.com, where the censorship regime has been banned by me. Follow me on social media at these names: Victoria Taft, the Adult in the Room podcast, and the Victoria Taft Show. Send media inquiries, or any others for that matter, to victoria@victoriataft.com. And here's a big ask. Would you please subscribe, share, like, comment, recommend, and give this program a 5-star rating where you can? We really appreciate it. We do not take that for granted either. Follow my work at, you guessed it, victoriataft.com. PJ Media, I write tons over there. Flamingo Audiobooks, and of course the radio. I don't do this alone. This show is produced and engineered by Overall Media. 1A Cast is responsible for some of the Adult in the Room podcast's imaging. Logo design by Hageman Creative. The Adult in the Room podcast is produced at Flamingo Road Studios. All rights reserved.